Qumran is widely celebrated as an archaeological triumph. The caves along the Dead Sea yielded hundreds of ancient manuscripts, offering an incredibly intimate look at the spiritual life of humanity 2 millennia ago. But look closely at the site's history, and it is defined just as much by repeating cycles of panic and loss. The vast majority of the Dead Sea Scrolls are highly delicate. The ink rests on fragile parchment and papyrus, recording hymns, rules, and theology. Then, in Cave 3, researchers found a complete anomaly. This document was punched directly into sheets of pure copper. It is a dry administrative inventory of 64 distinct locations across the Judean desert. Each entry details a hoard of gold, silver, or sacred vessels buried for safekeeping. The effort required to hammer letters into metal tells us this object was never meant to be a holy relic for quiet study. It was a durable crisis map, forged to safeguard billions of dollars in wealth during an impending apocalypse. That apocalypse arrived in 68 CE. The Roman Empire was closing in on Jerusalem, determined to crush the first Jewish revolt. The defenders inside the city knew a brutal siege was inevitable, and with it, the destruction of the Second Temple. The temple functioned as the central treasury of the ancient Jewish world. To prevent the Romans from capturing this immense wealth, priests and officials organized a massive logistical operation. They slipped out of the city to bury the assets in remote caves and cisterns before the walls were reduced to rubble. Roman forces breached the city in 70 CE. They slaughtered the inhabitants, burned the sanctuary, and marched away with whatever treasures remained inside. The people who knew the exact locations of the hidden desert hoards were either killed or enslaved, taking their secrets to the grave. For nearly 2,000 years, those hoards rested securely in the desert soil. The 1950s translation of the Copper Scroll resurrected that ancient tragedy as a modern obsession, setting off a chain of unauthorized excavations and institutional feuds that would eventually jeopardize the very history it was meant to save. While mainstream academics debated whether the massive quantities of gold listed in the scroll were purely mythical, amateur archaeologist Vendell Jones took the text at its word. He treated the Copper Scroll as a literal geographic map, matching its cryptic landmarks to the harsh terrain south of Qumran. In May 1992, Jones and his team focused on an area known as the Cave of the Twins. Bypassing the slow, methodical protocols of institutional archaeology, they dug straight down through protective layers of clay into a sealed recess deep within the bedrock. Jones reached a sealed pocket in the rock and recovered 600 kilograms of a reddish-brown organic powder. He identified it as the Ketoret, the highly specific, sacred incense burned twice daily by priests in the Second Temple. This data chart breaks down the chemical composition of that powder, giving Jones's claim unexpected weight. Microscopic and chemical analyses conducted in the early 90s identified specific organic compounds matching the historical ingredients of the temple incense. The testing showed traces of cinnamon, saffron, and myrrh, perfectly preserved by the vacuum of the cave.
This singular discovery immediately fractured the research community. For Jones and his followers, it was physical proof of the temple's survival. For academic institutions, it was an unregulated, sensationalized dig that completely bypassed scientific oversight, blurring the line between objective research and faith-driven obsession. The institutional backlash was swift. Because Jones announced the find to the press before submitting official reports, the Israel Antiquities Authority revoked his excavation permits. Critics within the establishment dismissed the material as ordinary red dirt, or the remains of an ancient soap factory. Locked out of museums and stripped of institutional support, the artifacts had nowhere to go. Without proper oversight to document and preserve the massive cache, the material was packed into cardboard grate boxes and makeshift containers, eventually ending up stored in a private civilian bomb shelter. The lack of professional custody set the stage for disaster. Decades passed, and the bulk of the materials slowly vanished. The situation reached a breaking point in May 2025 with the tragic murder of Sarah Richardson, the final private custodian responsible for watching over the remaining cache. Following her death, the region experienced intense wartime evacuations. During the chaos of clearing out the civilian shelters, workers who had no idea they were handling a potentially priceless archaeological artifact discarded the vast majority of the unguarded material. Between the bitter feuding of the academic establishment and the brutal realities of modern conflict, the incense was lost. Institutional infighting and civilian chaos achieved exactly what the Roman legions could not: the permanent erasure of the artifact. Today, researchers verifying the true nature of the Qumran powder are left with almost nothing. They are reduced to analyzing mere dust particles rescued from a single mason jar donated years later by Vendel Jones's widow. Meanwhile, the hunt for the remaining 64 hoards continues. Modern expeditions deploy advanced technology, shooting ground-penetrating radar into sites like the Cave of Letters to locate hidden subterranean chambers. But those underground voids ultimately fade into solid rock. Despite decades of surveys, the results remain the same. Expeditions dig down exactly as the scroll instructs and find only solid bedrock. The vast wealth of the Copper Scroll remains stubbornly missing. The priests of the First Jewish Revolt buried their sacred assets to protect them from an encroaching war, hoping to pull them back out of the earth when the violence passed. Instead, the items were swallowed up by history. In 2025, that exact cycle repeated itself, as war and neglect swallowed the only physical evidence we had actually recovered. The Copper Scroll was forged into metal to outlive an empire's collapse, and it succeeded. Yet the modern effort to recover its contents triggered a mirror of the same tragedy that hid them: a cycle of war, institutional ego, and carelessness. The Judean desert protected the temple's history for 2 millennia. Our modern world lost it in 3 decades.